I think this is the perfect place to start with screening, because we do not want to screen without a plan in place to use the screening data. And sometimes people get really excited about, oh, this makes sense, I want to do this. And things like what Hope posted in the chat, like sometimes teachers do feel hesitant to screen because they don't feel confident. They're not convinced that, like, and I've heard people personally say, who am I to screen? Like, who am I to say that? And that's why we have to provide education to the teachers on the accuracy of the information that they're providing. Not only do they need to know about the logistics, we need time to connect them with the information to show them that they're very short responses. Like, it's literally 15 minutes to screen your entire school using the SRSIE. And some of them take 45 minutes, but that's a very small amount of teacher time. But all these tools are amazingly accurate at using those total scores to predict outcomes. But teachers need time to interact with that information, get their questions asked and answered, because otherwise, and we've seen it go very badly when it's just like, hurry up and screen, just trust me, it'll be fine. That's not enough. Like, they're professionals. They need to have the information behind it, and they need to have time to get their questions asked and answered. And that's part of what we're doing here. And that's part of why, like, during the planning year, when you're planning out what this is going to look like, that is also the time to bring people to things like this. So like Susan might choose to tell her CI3T leadership teams, like, you might invite some of your faculty and staff to come continue their own learning at these empowers. And back in the day when we were organizing this sequence, like in Tennessee, Wendy and I used to pace these out strategically so that after session 3, like the one that Susan just did on Monday night, this session is later this week. So she could, if she wants to, have the team members learn about it here, and then they could come hear it again, or they could bring faculty and staff with them, but it's all paced out. This sequence is paced out to complement those that are training as well as those that are implementing. So keeping that in mind, let's talk now about the roles of screening and how we can actually use these data. And it's more than just connecting kids to tier 2 and tier 3 support. In addition to that, we want to make sure that you know that there's a base of learning and that there's a whole method of using these data. So first, we're going to start about the base. So when I think about building the base of not just the tier 1 experience, but we also want to build people's knowledge, confidence, and overall understanding of systematic screening. So on this tab on our website on ci3t.org, you can go and you can download information, watch videos, look at a variety of different resources. But this is a wonderful place to begin to go and learn about different types of screenings. And normally, like when you're in your building process, you spend time learning about all the screening tools that are out there. Typically, districts narrow those down to 1 or 2. Sometimes they will do 2 for a first year or a second year, so that not only can they see how they're working in their districts, but teachers can give input on that. But when you eventually solidify on which one you picked and installed, we want to go deep on the knowledge for that one. But I also still think it's important to do at least a basic understanding so that teachers know other screening tools were considered, let them know the reasons for your selection. So oftentimes people will lean towards like the student risk screening scale because it is a free access screening tool. So it's financially easy to sustain, and it takes the least amount of time, teacher time, than the other screening tools. I'm not saying it is the best screening tool in the world, but I'm saying we have to balance things that are psychometrically sound, because I don't care if it's easy, if it doesn't work correctly. We need to make sure that we're asking the right questions to find the kids that are most likely to experience challenges in school. But if it's really, really awesome and it takes too much time or it's too cumbersome, and sometimes it's really easy to collect but hard to score. So it's that balance between psychometrically sound and also being socially valid. So on this website, you see again a set of accordions. And if you open these up, there's varying amounts of information on some of these different screening tools. This isn't the only screening tools available. Like there's the DESA Mini now that you might also check out. But we want to make sure that you have the resources to inform your education. In the last 2 years, we've also had the opportunity to go in and revise some of the information that's there. So if you haven't been on this in a while, there are updated coaching protocols, so that there's information that if you're like a district level leader, how do you set it up in your district? There's also things if you're a school site leader or a teacher to say like, here's what it could look like on the day of and how it's going to get done. And there's very, very specific information, like things like coaching people to make sure they're not discussing it. This is not a teaming situation. These are independently teacher completed items. And so we want to make sure that people have clear information. And we have learned such wonderful things through the years, like the importance of checking your system. Tammy Becker is one. I remember the very first year that her district started screening, we specifically asked her to go in as a principal and try it out. And in her first test, we found an error in the initial setup. And thank God we had the testing done with the district, and it's all part of it. It's like you wouldn't build a survey or build something and launch it without testing it first, but you want to get the bugs out. Similarly, we've learned, like I remember one time Wendy and I were working in a couple districts in Pennsylvania, and we went and watched their first administration. So their technical assistance people got it up, and we were there to help them do a research project around it to check the accuracy. And what we learned watching people fill it out is that some people didn't scroll to the right. So in one school, there was a bunch of people that didn't answer the last 2 to 3 items because they didn't scroll all the way to the right. And these sound like very funny things, like, wouldn't that be obvious? It's like, it's human, it's the error. So we're learning about these things. There was another school one time where they had the school secretary set it up just for that school. And then when she saw the items, like they did the SRSS-IE, she felt that there was not a problem with stealing in her school. So she made the decision to delete the first item for the entire school. So teachers didn't fill it out, which meant, and Maddie's raising her eyebrow. I was like, oh my gosh. So that whole screening time point had to be thrown out for an honest, innocent mistake. So some of these coaching protocols that you'll see here, I know that great coaches like, Katie and Paloma and others, they use these in their coaching with CI3T leadership teams to make sure that we can learn from each other's experiences, successes, as well as challenges. But whatever the screening tool is, it's important for education around it. For example, we want to be really clear. People know that there should be no individual decision-making on item level data. Those data work by saying, if these behaviors occur together into a high enough degree, it's the total score that predicts outcomes. We know, because we've tried this, you can't say like, oh, Kathleen got a 3 on feeling anxious. On the anxious thing, she needs an anxiety intervention. It doesn't work like that. So these look at collections of behaviors that co-occur together. And we need to be really clear that people understand how they're going to be used. They're not going to be used to exclude, they're going to be used to support. And we need to make sure that people are clear on things like scoring. So there's lots and lots of logistics to make sure that at the end of the day, we get accurate information to inform instruction. So like in a screening, like the SRSS-IE, each kid in the entire school gets a total score that puts them into low, moderate, or high risk for externalizing and internalizing. Here are data that were collected as of last fall. So this is post-pandemic. So check out this school. They started implementing CI3T in fall of 2014. They implement through the years. Fall of 2020, that's the pandemic year. And then we see the post-pandemic year. And admittedly, some people are remote, some people are in person, but this is a trend that we saw in many, many different schools, that the percentage of kids initially in the low risk category went up. And I think it makes total sense. In many of these schools that already had CI3T structures in place, routines and procedures were on point because literally people's lives depended on it. So in their expectation matrices, people put on things like mask up, wear it over your nose and mouth. We all saw signage like that if you dared to leave your house. There was information about hand washing or using hand sanitizer. There was information about 6 feet apart. People taught those routines in incredibly explicit ways, and they were teaching it with the other things. I'm not surprised by these results. I think this is also a real gift to see that when people feel like things are crazy, you can go back and look at the data. And like in this specific school was feeling like behavior was worse after the pandemic. Their data don't support that. Their data actually support that things were better than the previous years pre-pandemic. Do you see the difference? And sometimes because of our own heightened feelings, it can feel different than what it actually is. And I'm not negating what people are feeling, but I am saying, let's use the data to share what's going on. And I think this is probably the biggest gift with screening now, not just this tool, but others like the SSBD, We can now accurately detect kids that have internalizing issues. And I have to say, so many years ago, it used to be people would say, I was so worried about that kid since kindergarten, or I knew there was a concern since that time. And people had no way to quantify the teacher's gut, so to speak. And now I'm so incredibly thankful that we have a reliable, valid way of looking for kids with internalizing disorders. So now I can look to see which kids, and like, this is pretty good. We're getting close to that 80% target, but now I have information to know, does this need to be a school as a whole interventions? Like if I'm not yet to the 80%, then I might want to pull more lessons from my validated social skills curriculum into tier 1 instruction to meet the needs of kids with internalizing issues. But these are really important, and I'm seeing great things happening in the chat. It also allows you to unpackage it by grade level. I'd like everybody to look at this table right now, and I'm going to ask you a question, but don't quite yet post it in the chat. Looking at this table, I'm going to give you a 5-second countdown in a second. Look at this table and tell me if you had to make a decision about where to provide resources to the grade level of students most in need. Would it be kindergarten, first grade, or second grade? Look at the data for a second. Where would you go in? Which grade level do you think has the most immediate need? And I'm going to give you a 5-second countdown. Go ahead and put your grade level in the chat, please. Beautiful. And we can quickly come to that decision because we can see, although the whole school is in really good shape, I've got about 82% of the kids in the green right here, meaning at low risk, compared to 93, 94. This is quick, accurate ways to know how to intervene. In addition, as I mentioned, we've learned and done many different studies, as has other teams. We know the data are really accurate. And to back to Hope's point, like these are the practical data that teachers need to know, is that total score, it's not used to make a placement. It's not used in isolation. I saw Mark put a comment earlier that to remember that it's not the only source of information that it's going to drive decision-making. It's part of a puzzle. But we know that those scores do predict how things go for kids. It predicts how well they read at the end of the year. It predicts whether or not they go to nurse visits. It predicts suspensions. It even predicts, it predicts course failures, et cetera, at the high school level. So when we have, not just the elementary information, we have information on middle schools as well, like in high school. So when we look at this, these are data from a middle school that's been screening for a number of years. Look at the percentage of kids in the low, moderate, and high risk categories over time at this middle school. And when I always feel like I have to say this, like right here, I feel like I need to say, these results aren't typical. You would typically expect to see about 3 to 5% of the kids at high risk. This school had less than 1%. The next year, when they saw an increase in risk, like green got big, or excuse me, yellow got bigger, red got bigger. First thing they did is they went back to their treatment integrity data. And when they unpackaged it, they realized that as they had hired new people in their building, they had not yet trained them in their system. And in the last presentation we did today, there was a good conversation about the importance of including all this in your onboarding. So as I'm looking at district leaders in this room, like how thankful are we to have people that can put this information like into new teacher induction and into information shared with new administrators. And some of the work we're doing on Project Enhance will do just that. Because again, we've learned that those fall scores actually predict how the kids fare over time. And it's not just one study. It's not just in one state. We see this time and time again. Screening scores predict academic outcomes as well as behavioral outcomes. I love looking at these data from one high school. A principal sent this to us, and check this out. This is 2016, 2017, and this is his internalizing scores. And he sent us this email that said, hey, Kathleen, check this out. One of my math teachers mentioned now that we have 3 years, we have data for a trend. And this is the percentage of kids in the low risk category in their building, 80, 90, 90. Percentage of kids in scoring in the yellow decreased from 10% to about 4. High risk, again, dropped from 9 to 5. And we saw the same type of thing for externalizing. One of the stories I love about this particular school, their LGBTQ community actually held a sit-in demanding that more lessons be put into the daily instruction to help skill build for other kids in their community to accept kids that have, with an individual differences. And I thought it was such an important response to people's need for equity. And I love the fact that those kids were asking for more of the instruction that was provided school-wide to have a better understanding. And so I think these are the responses of working in a system and showing how data can use these drivers to shape what's happening. And again, just like the middle school, we saw the same thing at high school. Those fall scores predicted grade point average, course failures, nurse visits. And at the high school, they also predicted office discipline referrals. We saw similar things for internalizing. And for both externalizing and internalizing, there is no statistically significant difference between kids' outcomes if they were in the moderate or high risk category, which means that any sign of risk at the beginning of the year is something we should pay attention to. It is cause for concern. So I'm not saying these are perfect studies. There's definitely room to grow. And thanks to people like Wendy and Mark Buckman and Rebecca Sherrod and Paloma and Eric, we've had the opportunity to build a downward extension of this tool. It's called the Student Risk Screening Scale for Early Childhood, and it's been tested in actually 4 different studies, featured now in 2 different papers. And Paloma Perez-Clark actually has her comprehensive exam study tomorrow presentation. She'll be talking about this there. So go you, Paloma. And so we're going to be looking to see how this gets applied in the years ahead. And the next wave of studies for this will be on predictive validity studies. But there is now initial evidence, and this is available to you. It is not the same items as those used at the elementary, middle, and high school. So please be attentive to that. And as we think about this collection of partners, the thing that I'm so excited about is that we all have this commitment to making sure that we're looking for something that is practical and effective. So as you are thinking about your needs for screening, know that these resources are there. If you want the full collection of articles, let us know, but we have worked to provide these very brief, like 1-page things so that you can have the information you need. The other thing that we've spent time doing is building information on screening in the COVID era. For example, everything we're talking about tonight is simply teacher completed screenings. And something to keep in mind is that there's no new information from teachers completing these, in the sense that teachers are mandated reporters. So like Ivy could be confident in the fact that if a teacher suspected a child was at risk to themselves or others, a teacher in that building would have already reported it. They're not going to be writing that down for the first time on a screener. However, there are also wonderful screening tools that are student completed and parent completed. And I am begging you to please screen responsibly. If you're going to draw those in as other sources of information, and they're good, but you have to be able to use them. It's not something that you can shelf and get to it when you get to it. Because if a kid is filling something out that suggests that they are at heightened risk, or that a parent is seeing something and that we're not privy to, we have to be prepared to respond to that. Sometimes people will screen in waves. One of the partners that we presented with at the PBIS Implementers Forum, they actually screen different grade levels on different days so that their mental health providers can take a first look at those parent and student completed items right away so that they can get those supports out there. And as something that, again, was mentioned in the chat earlier, this is just a screener. Like if you were to go to the doctor's office, and go get your blood pressure taken, if it's higher than average, it could be because I'm nervous about being at the doctor. It could be because I'm in pain and my body registers pain for being that, or it could be that there you have chronic high blood pressure. It could be any of those. So this is just a starting point. Another question that frequently comes up is, should you stagger 2 universal screeners? Like, should I do the SRSS IE and then a couple weeks later do the SDQ? And the answer is no. When you screen kids in, and you might do 2 screeners at exactly the same time as you're building confidence in which ones to use. But if you're going to get additional information, we do that with a diagnostic, just like we do in reading, like where you get the reading screening to see how it's going. And then if you need more information, you go deeper. You're going to do the same thing with behavior screenings. So like you might do the SIS rating scale or the BAS3 full assessment so that you can go in to learn more about where kids' needs are. But again, I want to make sure that you know there's resources out there. If you look on our website, one of the things that I'm really excited about that was developed by Jennifer Rolandhagen, Mark Buckman and Wendy Oakes, was this screening quarter training manual. And this is where we put everything together with the generosity of our Institute for Education Science funding from Project Screen. And as part of this, we put together what we know to be current and true for each stage of setting up. So now we've got this manual that you can use as a resource if you're installing that. And it gives you good considerations for thinking about things like security, making sure that the screenings are done correctly. And I want you to hold on to some of those specific examples of errors from the past and think about how that stuff is going to get shared. And importantly, how it's going to intersect or intertwine and connect to other sources of data. We just don't want to drive all of decision-making just on systematic screening. We want to look at it with other screening data like reading screening and attendance and office discipline referrals. And when you think about sharing, there are a number of resources, and the website, when you log into this, it's going to look a little bit different because there's other resources there now. But you have, if you want templates, I know a lot of people are liking these little graphs that we have. And I know some districts that we partner with, they have all these automated, they make them. But if you yourself want to download these to see what it looks like, these are all editable PowerPoints where you can click to say edit data, and you can put your own data in and have your graphs. But it's wonderful to be able to have those resources. Also, I want to say that we have also had the honor of being one of the subcontract sites for PBS5, which is part of the National Center on Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. And that team involves Rebecca and Wendy and Mark and Ma Ziji. And we've had this opportunity to work with several people on our team to build other resources that you'll find on this website, pbs.org. There's things on selected universal behavior screening tools. There's guidance or lessons learned from practitioners. And you'll see some tips for communicating with your community, which we think is important in particular because screening is not a secret. And Rebecca, to the extent you can, if she's going to go ahead and put some links into the chat, and I would encourage you to do this. And we just found out this morning that there are 3 new resources from our team that have been vetted by the National Center and are currently on that website as well. So as you watch Rebecca populate the chat, know that there are tips here. So these are on a different website than CI3T. It's on pbis.org. So that's where the link will take you to. I encourage you to go download these and store these, check back often. And I want to give a personal shout out to Rebecca and to Wendy for making this possible. They do a fantastic job at translating research to practice, and I'm really, really honored to get to work with both of them. And Jamie Jones, thank you so much for managing all the budgets on this and every single project that we have. So as you look at those resources there, the new things from today and the others that we've shown you on CI3T and PBIS, we're going to invite you into your next conversation now, and we're going to spend about 10 minutes just taking a look at some of the details. We've talked at 30,000 foot view of why screen. We screen so we can look at the school as a whole, unpackaged by grade level, and empower teachers and be able to connect kids to supports. But let's talk about the practicalities. Are you screening? If so, what are you doing? How might you think this be useful for you? Like, let's take a look at the site level preparation protocol. And this is again on the screening page. So if you're not screening, totally fine. Think about what questions you might have. So let's jump back in to your next room.